Let me preface this by saying that this is a completely true account. In 1985, my family moved to the Pacific Northwest. My father was in the military and was stationed in Washington State. He would serve on a ship bound for Alaskan waters for 2 years. My mother, sister, and I settled in a small town about 45 minutes outside of Seattle. Our new house was built in a brand new neighborhood, smack in the middle of a large pine forest. Having lived on the East Coast, the Pacific Northwest was a huge adventure. I had just turned 13 and was in the 7th grade. I quickly made friends and eventually became inseparable from my 3 best friends, Dan, Jake, and Ryan. The woods around the neighborhood became our playground. Hiking, camping, and fishing was all we did the first summer. We all had gotten paper routes delivering the Seattle Times in our new neighborhood. The papers were delivered daily to a small wooden shack at the edge of the neighborhood on a small gravel road. We would go early in the morning while it was still dark. We would load the papers in our satchels, jump on our bikes, and off we'd go. The shack was at the edge of a large forest that was on a nature preserve. It was about a mile outside of the neighborhood, and often was a creepy ride in the dark of the morning. We would arrive at about 5:30 a.m. We all lived in different parts of the neighborhood, so usually we rode there by ourselves. The woods were teeming with coyote. Their mournful cry in the dark morning would definitely put you on edge, but they were pretty harmless, except for some of the domestic pets that were being eaten by them. While there were several hiking trails and campsites that we frequented, the woods next to the shack were a bit of a mystery. They had an ominous vibe, but we were curious and decided we would go exploring. We decided one Saturday after delivering, we would have lunch and go hike into the woods, and possibly camp overnight. We told our parents we were spending the night at Ryan's, whose house was closest to the edge of the forest. We packed some camping gear, strapped on our survival knives, grabbed our slingshots, flashlights, and headed out at around 1:30. We did do a little prep. We had a topo map of the preserve. It was an older map, and our neighborhood was not even on it, but the gravel road that our paper shack was on the map. It looked like it led to several fire trails that crossed the preserve. The preserve was not huge, but still quite large, about 8 miles west until you hit a major road, and bordered by a large river to the north and main town to the south. We set off in high spirits, joking around, kings of the woods. I often equate it to the movie Stand By Me. We were all roughly the same age, and the landscape was almost identical to the movie. We planned to head as deep as we dared and find a good spot to camp. We explored along the way. The forest was dense with ferns and moss. The soil was lumpy and swampy in parts, but we moved easily through the undergrowth. We explored some rock outcrops and large downed trees. We took some shots with our slingshots at various targets. After 2 hours of leisurely hiking, I would say we had covered a couple of miles. We came to the top of a stream valley that dropped for several hundred feet to a stream below that rose steeply on the other side. We decided we would hike down the slope, across the stream, and up the other side. At that point, we decided whether to set up camp or head back. After 20 minutes, we managed to scramble almost up to the other side. As we neared the top, we noticed a huge downed pine several feet in diameter. It was about 4 feet off the ground. Dan was the biggest, and was the first to jump on it. Guys, he said, you need to see this. As we all jumped onto the log, it took me a second to process what I was looking at. We had stumbled into a large circular clearing about 300 feet in diameter. In the center was a small cabin or garage. It looked like fairly new construction, as the cedar siding looked new and the large triangular windows looked very modern. I immediately had the feeling of Hansel and Gretel. Something didn't feel right, and as we scanned the clearing, we spotted some odd structures. Dan and Jake hopped off the log and into the clearing. Myself and Ryan were hesitant, but followed. As we slowly moved left, we saw what looked to be a large fire pit surrounded by several rocks and logs. At first glance, it looked to be a campfire site, but we quickly saw something that made us take a pause. A large tree stump that was charred was facing the stone and log benches. We slowly circled around the front of the stump when we saw what looked like a totem pole face. The face was carved out of the stump in a demonic-looking grimace. The mouth, nose, and eyes were heavily charred. We crept closer and noticed the hollow stump was filled with bones. Next to the stump was a large stone that had feathers and fur strewn about its base, and rust-colored stains ran down the side of the stone. We all looked at each other wide-eyed. "This was some sort of animal sacrifice. We have got to get out of here," Ryan said. We were all thinking the same thing, but something else caught our eye. Towards the edge of the clearing, we saw 7 large mounds of dirt. We decided quickly to check them out and make a hasty retreat. When we got closer to the mounds, we realized it was dirt left from digging holes. 7 perfect rectangular holes, 6 foot by 4 foot. Oh my god, there's fucking bodies in there. I was right behind Dan when he shouted. I got a glance of pale skin and yellow hair. Everyone was already backpedaling towards the woods. "Wait," I said, a flood of relief coming over me. "Mannequins! They're mannequins!" The guys slowly crept back, and sure enough, all 7 graves had a mannequin in it. Blonde, brunette, redhead. Some were undressed, some had dresses on. Whatever this place was, it was messed up. It was time to leave, but by this point we were fairly close to the cabin. There was a small wraparound deck in the front of the cabin with a large picture window. We decided we had to get a look. Something sinister was going on, and we had to tell the authorities. As we tiptoed towards the cabin, we noticed a small gravel road entering on the opposite side of the clearing. There was vehicle access. The 4 of us slowly ascended the deck and peered into the window. It basically looked like a large kitchen. One side of the wall was all cabinets, a sink and 2 ovens. In the middle of the floor was a large metallic table. It looked like it had a lab table with a drain in the center. On the opposite wall was a ladder leading up to what looked like a loft. I could make out some mattresses. A single door led to what looked like a bathroom. We all had our hands cupped to the window to look inside. Just then, alarm bells went off in my head. A feeling of overwhelming dread washed over me. I backed away from the window. In my absolute horror, I saw a reflection in the window. 3 hooded figures stood on the gravel road at the entrance of the clearing. Jake spun around, and his eyes went wide as saucers, and all the blood ran out of his face. At this point, all 4 of us had turned. 3 robed and hooded figures stood about 75 feet from us. Their heads were tilted forward, and under the large hoods we couldn't make out any facial features. The first figure raised his head slightly. I could make out what looked like a beak. He had some sort of animal mask on. The fight-or-flight survival instinct was in full swing. Adrenaline flooded my body. Dan, who was the most mature of all of us, had the same thought, because in a loud baritone voice he bellowed, "We're armed." What the hell was he thinking? We all had large hunting knives on our belts and slingshots with large ball bearings, but who knew what the hell they had under their robes? 4 of us and 3 of them. One was not going to end up in the messed up sacrifice totem or grave. A million thoughts were running through my head. Ryan to my right was full on shaking. With his teeth chattering, he let out a whimper. The 3 figures didn't say a word. They just slowly took 3 steps towards us. All the bravado and bluster had gone, and we took off like a frightened herd of deer. We leapt off the deck in a full sprint towards the huge lot at the east of the clearing. As we cleared the back of the cabin, I noticed 1 hooded figure running towards us, and 2 more hooded figures had emerged from the woods that were running to cut us off. We were in full survival mode, running for our lives. As we closed in on the log, we all saw it at the same time. 3 more figures rounding the sacrifice totem in a dead run. Their long robes gave them the appearance of gliding across the clearing. It was absolutely terrifying. Dan was the first to the log, and he took a mighty leap right on top and over to the other side. I was close on his heels. Adrenaline can make you do amazing things. I was able to my surprise, make it to the top in one jump. I then leapt down. Dan was already 20 feet ahead of me and down the slope. Just as I turned my head, I heard a sickening thud. Ryan, the third over the log, had tripped and fallen over the log. To my amazement and relief, he rolled right back to his feet and strided past me like I was standing still. Jake still had not crested the log. He was the smallest, but he was quick. By this point, Dan and Ryan were halfway down the slope. Jake had still not appeared. We couldn't leave him, but I couldn't go back. Just then, Jake came crashing through the brush just ahead of me. He must have cut behind him as they were converging on us. At this point, I was the one in the back, and I looked back. I'll never forget what I saw. That image burned into my memory and nightmares. 8 hooded figures all standing on the log. I could only see them from the shoulders up, but their faces were all visible. Hideous animal masks on all of them. They looked like some sadistic manchery of evil. They didn't pursue us past the log, and they never spoke even a word. What had been a 2-hour leisurely hike had become a 25 through 30-minute sprint. We never let up for a minute. Our lungs were burning, our muscles screaming. We finally cleared the forest and collapsed in a heap at the paper shed. We were all trying to process what had just happened. It felt surreal, like a dream. We immediately headed to Ryan's house and told his parents. His parents called the police. The police interviewed us and asked us everything we remembered. Several days later, an officer came by my house to talk to my mother and I. They had found the cabin. It was private property, and we had been trespassing. The owner would not press charges as long as we didn't return. They found some odd things, but nothing illegal. I asked them what about the animal sacrifices, the bones and the feathers. The officers told us that it could have been remnants of cleaning animals after a hunt. I blurted out, "But what about the graves and mannequins?" The officer sternly said that they were looking into it. Needless to say, the word spread around the neighborhood, and everyone kept clear of that preserve. Years later, I remember talking to my mother about the terrifying incident. Turns out that the police had talked to some of the parents privately. The town next to us had several ongoing investigations regarding satanic cults and similar groups. Several people, including children, had gone missing from surrounding towns. To this day, 30 years later, I shudder at the thought of what would have happened if we had been caught. This happened a few years ago, when I was 19. My sister and I are very close, so we basically do everything together, and we were chilling at a friend's house for a few hours one winter night. It was around 10 p.m. when we decided to leave because we had to walk home. It was only a 20-minute walk, but I'm naturally a cautious person, so I didn't like to walk around in the dark when it's late. We headed on our way, and everything seemed normal. We were just talking about the usual things girls talk about when we got to a quieter part of town, which was just a very long road with a swimming pool to the left of us, which was closed at the time, and a field to our right, which led to some houses that weren't finished being built yet. As we were walking, we noticed a white van slowly driving beside us, and 2 guys who looked to be in their late 30s staring out at us. We were creeped out. My sister said, "What the fuck are they staring at us for?" in a nervous voice, but I just told her to keep walking. As the van passed, I felt relieved until I saw the van turn into the swimming pool car park and turn around and head back in our direction. We froze in shock as we watched the van, trying to figure out what the guys were doing. I looked around, but there was no one else around. We were all alone. This is when things got even scarier. The van pulled up at the sidewalk, only a few feet away from my sister and I, and one of the doors swung open and a guy got out and started to walk towards us. I panicked, grabbed my sister's hand and shouted for her to run, as I ran and pulled her through the field to our right. I looked back for a second as we were running, and to my horror I could see the guy running a little bit behind us. We eventually reached the area where the houses were being built, and we hid behind a large dumpster. We were terrified. My sister rang her boyfriend, quietly crying into the phone as she told him what was happening, trying to be as quiet as possible. He told us to stay where we were and that he was on his way to get us. As we waited alone and scared to death, we could hear the guy's footsteps close by. We were too scared to look out from behind the dumpster to see where he was, so we just held on to each other, almost holding our breath in case we even breathed too loud. After what seemed like forever, my sister's boyfriend called her and told her that he was walking towards the houses now with two of his friends, and that they had brought crowbars and weapons. Once we heard him close enough, we ran out to him crying, but also relieved. The two guys in their van were nowhere to be seen. My sister's boyfriend drove us around for a while before he dropped us off at home to try and find them, but they never did. I have no idea what those guys wanted from us, but I know it wasn't good. My mother thinks they wanted to kidnap us. I'm just glad they never caught us. I'm 23 now, and I haven't walked home at night since. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. If you would like a chance to have your story featured in an upcoming video, make sure you email it to urmaker6260@gmail.com. I hope everyone had an amazing weekend, and I really appreciate you dropping by to check out this video. I'll catch you in the next one, and just remember, it's always scarier if it's true. We slowly circled around the front of the Trump. Oh, that's so stupid.